Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 8 of my Arduino and electronics tutorial series. In this part of the tutorial, because you guys told me I was doing too much with electronics and not enough with programming, I am going to show you how LCDs work, as well as completely create Conway's Game of Life using an Arduino and an LCD panel. Like always, all the code is available in the description underneath the video, and what I'm going to do now is jump into the future and show you what the finished Game of Life application is going to look like. Okay, so what you see here is our program and everything that we're going to create in this tutorial, and it automatically generates a pattern that is completely random, and then it applies the rules of the Game of Life to both create life and destroy life. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over and show you the finished circuit diagram. Okay, so you saw the finished process or program that we are going to be creating, and this is going to be the standard layout. We're going to be using an LCD display library that's going to make it very easy, and everything is going to be connected exactly as you see here. What we have right here is a 10K potentiometer that is going to allow us to control the screen brightness, and this is a very standard way to set up an Arduino with an LCD, so that's why I'm using this. And over here we have a 220 ohm resistor, and then of course we have an LCD screen and basically a LCD display panel with 16 pins like you can see right here is going to work, but I also in the description have a link to the kit that I am using. And now what I'm going to do is program out and show you how we can work with LCDs, and then after I go through that, I'm going to create the entire Conway's Game of Life using an Arduino. Okay, so here is our Arduino IDE, and I'm just going to set up everything here to demonstrate an LCD, and then after that I am going to demonstrate how we can create the Game of Life. So we're going to come in here and we're going to use this handy dandy little library. It is liquidcrystal.h. And then we need to set up the display by designating the pins that we're going to be using. Again, if you use the setup that I showed you in the previous slide, you will have no problem, and that is all this is doing. It's telling it exactly how we are going to be working with those different pins that I showed you previously. Then what I want to do is show you how to basically pass in a string and have it display. And then also we're going to create a custom character here. So what I want to do is I want to draw a heart on our LCD display. And basically the way this works is each number is going to represent those LEDs that are going to be lit on a row and those that are not. So for example, if we had 00011, that is of course going to be equal to 3 in binary, and that basically means that we are going to light the last 2 LEDs and leave the rest of them not lit. So how we create that is we're going to be creating a byte, and this is going to be 8, and then for each of the lights that we're going to be lighting up on the screen, we are going to be passing in a base 10 number. So this creates an array. So we're going to have 0, meaning nothing's going to be lit, and then 10, and then 31. You're going to see what this looks like here whenever I display it on the screen, and 31, 14, 4, and then once again 0. And once again, all I'm doing is I am taking a binary value, and then I'm showing its base 10 equivalent. So of course 0 means we're not lighting anything. 10 is going to be represented with this value here, and you can sort of see here how the heart's being formed. This is the top 2 bumps, and then there's all filled in the middle, and then you can see it goes down into a point. Hopefully you can see that. But that's basically what we're doing here. We're using base 10 to represent those binary values that are going to be lit up. All right? Okay, so we have our heart that we're going to draw, and this is going to be very important because we're going to light up everything using the Game of Life as you saw previously. So again, I don't think I'm going to print anything to the serial monitor, but I'm just in the habit of doing that. So then what I need to do is state that the display has 2 rows with 16 characters per row. So LCD, and I'm going to go begin and 16 by 2. And then after that, I need to create our heart character. And how I do that is I go LCD and create character. And I'm going to pass in 0, which is going to represent the character on our LCD. Each of the characters you're going to want to print are going to have a unique character number. So then I reference the array that I want to use to build this character. Then I need to move the cursor into position. So I'm going to say that I want it to go in the upper left-hand corner. So that would be 0 and 0. And that's going to move it into position. After that, I can print out an actual string or just a single character. So here I'm going to say I and put a space in, and it's going to print that on the screen. Then what I want to do is I want to print my heart. So to print a created character, you are going to actually use write instead of print. And I'm going to convert this into a byte. And then I put in the character number that I want to display or I want to use. And that's that guy right there. And then after that, I just come in and let's say I want to print some more words after that. I can go LCD and print and LCDs and close that off like this. And then finally, I don't do anything else. That's enough. All right, so then I go and make sure I didn't type anything wrong and upload to the Arduino. And it is going to print out heart LCDs. And I'm going to jump over and I'm going to show you that. And then after that, I am going to create the game of life. And you can see here the final output. All right, so there you go. And now I'm going to write all of the code for the game of life. Okay, so now let's create the game of life. Well, the very first thing I want to do is I want to define how many of the characters I want to print on my LCD panel. And I've decided that I want to use 8. I want to have 4 across the top and 4 across the bottom, like you saw whenever we jumped into the future. So I'm going to define that. I'm going to say the maximum number of rows is going to be equal to 16. So there are 8 individual lights for every single character, and I'm going to have 2 rows. So that means if we take 8 times 2, it equals 16. All right, so that's where that comes from. Then what I want to do is, because every character I print on the screen is going to be a custom-made, automatically generated character. Then each of the characters is going to be 5 across, if you refer back to the way the LCD panel looks, and I want to have 4 of them, so that's where I get 20 from. Then what I want to do is I want to calculate the total number of characters so that I could change this. Just be aware that the Arduino isn't the most powerful thing on earth, and if you try to fill up all of the characters, you might start getting all kinds of weird memory problems. So that's just something to think of. But as you saw, everything's safe here. So how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to go maximum columns divided by 5, and then I'll multiply that times 2. And you can go in there and play around with the code after we get this all set up so that you will be able to fill up more of the board, and then you can see at what point the Arduino breaks down. Now, as we saw in the first example, this is going to represent one character that the Arduino is going to print out on the screen. But I want to use more than just one character. So what I'm going to do is these are all 1s and 0s, so I'm going to create a Boolean array, and I'm going to call it game board. And then I just come in and I say maximum rows, and then I go maximum columns. And I'm going to use a random number generator to go and fill in this so that every single time we run our program, it's going to look completely unique. So this is just one character that is going to go on the board. And we're going to, of course, use more than one character. Now, we are also going to be storing in another array just the game of life representations that for each of the characters. Because remember, we have to use base 10 values. And I'm sort of messing around here just so I can show you different ways to manipulate binary values as well as bytes, and because that's going to be very, very useful whenever you create your own custom things. So this is just the base 10 representation of all the values that make up this character that we have up here in binary. So what I need to do is go and create a byte array, and I'm going to call this game of life array, and this guy is just going to contain the number of characters, as well as there's going to be 8 for each one of them. So I'm going to have number of characters, and then the characters are going to be in an additional array inside of this, and each character is going to be made up of 8 individual values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as you can see right here, and then if you count down, you can see there's 8 there. So that is where we are going to be able to create that, and then I'm going to populate it later on whenever we get into our code. So now what I need to do is think about all of the different functions I'm going to need in my code to make this guy properly work. So I'm just going to run through that. So some of the things I'm going to need to do is I am going to need to get our LED row values. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to put all that in here. So I'm going to say I want to get my LED row value. And what I specifically mean in regards to this is I need to convert from binary to base 10. And I know that because I'm looking at this. Okay, I know I'm going to have a bunch of binary array, and I'm also going to have a base 10 array. So it makes sense that I'm going to need to do that. What else am I going to need to do? Well, I'm going to also need to generate this game of life array. So I'm breaking down everything into its individual parts. This is going to generate a value, this guy right here, and this guy right here is going to generate all the values. But I want to use as many functions as possible so that my functions are small and they are easy to manage. What else am I going to need to do? Well, I'm going to have to create a function that is going to generate a random array. All right, so I know that this guy here needs to be created somehow, so I know I would like to have a function that does that for me. What else am I going to need to do? Well, I need to get the character data from this array that we have right here and then print them on our display. See, I'm just breaking everything down just by looking at what I have and knowing where I want to go. So I'm going to say that I want to be able to print the character on the LCD display. What else are we going to have to do? Well, knowing all that I know here, I also know that I want to be able to cycle through all the characters to print on both rows of our LCD, and I'm going to use the print character to print each individual character. This is just going to print all the characters. So I need to print to our LCD. So this is going to print characters. This is going to print everything. All right, all the characters, I guess I should say. What else might I want to do? Well, I am going to also be in a situation where I want to update my board. See, the game of life is basically set up. Maybe I should just cover the rules for the game of life. Maybe that'll make sense. So what I want to do is I'm going to be comparing values on the game board and then generating another brand new game board. So chances are that means I'm going to have to copy my array. All right, then let's think about the rules of the game of life. So we'll just call this game of life rules. And then we're going to be basing everything, our code we write, to properly update our board. Okay, so the basic game of life rules is, and when I say cell, what I mean is a lit light, on our LCD display that we have. So the basic rule says, if we have any living cell or light with less than 2 neighbors, then we want to turn that light off. If we have any living cell with 2 or 3 neighbors, it will continue to stay lit. If we have any living cell with more than 3 neighbors, then it is going to be turned off. And a dead cell with exactly 3 neighbors is going to be lit or born. All right, so that's the basic general rules of how the game of life works. And knowing all this, I know that I'm going to have to create a function that is going to update the board. And now we have to think about what else are we going to want to do. Well, what I think I want to do is I want to come down here and I want to think about the whole process of what I need to do in the setup phase and then what I need to do in our loop phase. So I know that one thing that I'm going to want to do is I want to generate a random array, and I know that that is going to be a function I want to create, and I also know it. See, generate a random array, this guy right here. So I'm going to do that. And what else am I going to do in the setup phase? Well, I'm going to also generate a game of life array. So let's just put that inside of there. And I am going to want to print to my LCD. So there are the different things that I know I want to do in my setup phase. What then am I going to want to do in the loop phase that's going to execute over and over again? Well, I am going to want to pause. Let's just put it at 500 and see if that works out. So that's half of a second. I am then going to need to update my board, and then I'm also going to want to generate a brand new array that is going to have all my base 10 values for my game of life array. And then I'm also going to want to print to my LCD. All right. And I love it whenever I create functions that don't have any attributes in them, because that normally means things are going pretty good. So hopefully we can do this all without having to pass attributes inside of functions, because that makes it so good. Okay, so then what I need to do up here is define each of these individual functions and how they're going to work. All right, so I have get row value, and I need to convert from binary to base 10. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to call this get LED row value, because I think that is good and it makes sense. And do I need to pass anything inside of this? Yes, I kind of do. I'm going to have to pass in a byte that is going to represent our LED row, and a byte that is going to be the maximum column that I'm going to be working with. So basically, we will generate the values that go into the game of life array by adding the values in the binary value, this guy up here, and then how we're going to convert it to base 10 is we're going to be multiplying each of those individual values by 16 and 8 and 4 and 2 and 1. All right, and as you can see, these values are going down, so I'm going to have to accommodate for that. And I'm also going to have those values multiplied times this to convert these binaries into a base 10 value. Okay, so hopefully this all makes sense. So what do I need to do is I need to say that the minimum column is going to be equal to the max column minus 4. All right, and that is because I am going to be working from the right side of this and then moving upwards. And then I'm going to, of course, need a value that I'm going to be multiplying towards. Again, it's the 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. All right? And you're going to see here in a second. What else am I going to need to do? Well, I'm going to need to hold the 5-digit value, which represents which lights to turn on for each row, which makes up each of the characters. So I'm just going to call this LED value, and I'm going to give it a value of 0 to start off, of course, because it's, hasn't been added. I also said that I'm going to need to multiply this. So let's just call this multiplier. And the first value whenever we're generating from binary into a base 10 value is 1. And then it's going to go up to 2, 4, I'm just making sure you guys caught that. Okay, so then what do I need to do? Well, of course, I'm going to need to cycle through each binary value and convert them into base 10 values. So that's just a for loop. So I'm going to go int I is equal to, and I'm going to start at the max column, which is the rightmost value. And I'm going to continue doing this as long as I is greater than or equal to the minimum column. All right, so we got that all set up. And I'm doing this largely out of my head, so, just bear with me here. Okay, I think it's very valuable to sort of watch me sort of work through these problems out of my head versus, me just typing stuff out and not explaining how I'm thinking. So I'm going to go LED row and then I. And then I'm going to multiply that towards whatever the multiplier is, which is going to be increasing each time through. Then, of course, after we multiply that, I'm going to increase the value of our multiplier. So multiplier and multiply that times 2 because it's 1, 2, 4, All right, so after I do that, then I know I have all of those binaries properly converted into a base 10, and I can return our new LED value. All right, so good stuff. We are able to convert from binaries into base 10 values. So then what do I need to do? Well, I need to generate my game of life array. And this is just going to generate the 8 values that make up each character for each row that will be printed to our LCD display. So I am going to come in, and I'm also in the code, there's a transcript of everything I say, so you can look there. So what am I going to need to do here? Well, I'm going to need to create a function, and it's not going to return anything. So game of life array, and then basically I need to get the max column, which is going to be 4 because the indexes go from 0 to 4 for a 5-digit line. So I'm going to go int, and max column is going to be equal to 4. And then I'm going to have to create another for loop. So let's go int I is equal to 0. And then we're going to continue doing this as long as I is less than the number of characters. And I am going to be doing this for the first row of LCD characters and then the second row for my LCD characters because the columns are going to be different. So if I know the total number of columns is going to be equal to, or total number of characters is going to be equal to 8, and I have 4 characters per line, then I just divide this by 2 to do the first line that's going on the LCD panel and then the second one after that. So we'll do this. All right, so now that I have that, I can create another for loop, and let's just call this J, and again it's going to start off with 0, and we're going to continue as long as we don't get up to 8, because there is going to be 8 individual rows for each of our characters that we're going to be generating. So let's just increment J inside of there, and then I will put these inside of our game of life array, and that, and then we will call this function up here, get LED row value, for each of the individual values that we're going to be getting out of there. So I'll just throw this inside here, and we need to pass in J as well as the maximum column that we are going to work from. All right, so we got that. After that, we are then going to jump to the next character that we're going to create. So we're going to jump to the right and create the next character. So to do that, we're just going to say maximum column, make sure you do this outside of that for loop, is going to be equal to, and it's 5 because there's 5 individual lights for every single character. All right, so we got that all set up. And now basically we're going to do the same exact thing for the second row of characters. So I'm going to go and set my maximum column again back to the very first character. And then I can come down and do basically the same sort of thing. So let's just go and type it all down. All right. So I'm going to go int I is going to be equal to, and this is going to be the number of characters divided by 2, and then I'm going to continue as long as I is less than the number of characters. So I'm doing basically the opposite that I'm doing here. Here I'm going to be going for the values from 0 to 4, and here I'm going to be going from 4 to 8. All right. So hopefully that makes sense for the second row of values that we're going to work with. And then inside of this, I'm going to use this again because we are going to have a total of 8 of those. So I might as well just copy that. And then I'm going to go and get this guy right here where we're going to get each individual character. And I think everything is exactly, no, this is going to slightly change because the number of characters is going to work with, or we're going to have to increment this up. So we'll go num of characters divided by 2. All right, so we got that all set up. And then of course we're going to have to increase the maximum column that we're working with again after that. And I think that is everything. So this guy right here is going to generate each individual value, and this is going to generate all the values and save them into our game of life array. So what do I need to do now? I need to generate our random array. Maybe should have did that ahead of time, above, but whatever. That's how my brain works. So generate random array, and this is just going to be a bunch of binary values, and this is random, so that means I need to generate a random seed. And again, we're going to use analog read pin 0 because that is going to give us a fluctuating value, which is great if you're trying to generate random values. So I will come in and I will do so. So I'm going to say a is equal to 0 and a less than, and I'll go maximum rows, because what I'm doing here is I'm generating all the values for our game board. Say maximum rows, maximum columns. All right, back down inside of here. So here we go. Maximum rows and a plus plus, and then I'm going to also create another for loop, of course, since this is a multi-dimensional array, and I'll just call this b is equal to 0, and we're going to do this as long as b is less than our maximum columns. And there we are, and let's increment b, of course, each time through, and then I just store these inside of the game board. So pretty simple stuff. I'm generating a random multi-dimensional array, not the craziest thing on earth. Again, something that is very useful whenever you're programming Arduinos. If you understand how to do this, you are going to be golden. You're going to be able to play with bytes and bits like a master. All right, that's all you need to do to generate a random array. So then what do I need to do? Well, I need to print the individual characters. So I want to get the character data from the game of life array, which is base 10 values, and print them on our LCD panel. So again, I see no reason to pass any attributes or return any values. This is just going to do that, but I am going to need to pass in the character number, because remember from the first example I gave you, each value you print on your LCD display has to have a unique character number. So, and then I have to say, well, what column on the LCD panel are you going to print to, and then what row are you going to print to? And that's all that I can think of. What we're going to need to do here is get a pointer to the array that is holding the array that's going to represent each character that we want to print. Going out of my way to demonstrate how to use pointers and all kinds of weird stuff here, so that it'll help you whenever you do this in the future. So I'm going to call a function called, I'm going to call the get the array, and I'm going to store this in a temporary byte pointer, and I just need to pass in the character number that I'm going to be working with, and then after that I'm going to create a character with the character number and the character array data. So just like we did previously, create character and pass in, just like we did previously, also the character number, and then temp, which is actually going to point at the very first part of the array that has our character data. Then I need to put the cursor in the right row and column and then print it. And to do that, I just go LCD, set cursor, and pass in the column I want to print on and the row that I want to print on. And then I write to it. So write, and we're going to say byte, and pass in our character number. All right, so everything is looking pretty good. And I think that's all I need to do for that. So then what I need to do is I need to cycle through all the characters to print on both rows of the LCD and print them with the print character function we have right here. So print to LCD sounds like a pretty good name. And this code isn't optimized. That's one of the downsides of watching me just create code out of my head, is that stuff isn't always optimized. But as you saw in the very beginning of this video, everything works. So, that's a good thing. All right, so let's go and create this. And I'm going to, of course, need another for loop. So I'm going to say I is equal to 0, and I'm going to continue doing this depending upon, again, I'm going to do this I'm going to print the first row and then the second row, because the row changes, and I don't know, just the way I'm writing this code, it just makes sense for me right now. So I'm going to go and print that and increment the value of I for this. And then what I can do is call to print the individual characters. So I'm going to say print character I and the starting column that I'm going to work with. And then I'm going to pass in 0, which represents the row on the LCD. 0 is the first row and 1 is the second row. So then I can also go and print the character. And here I'm going to go I plus, and this is going to be num of characters divided by 2, and characters, and whoops, that's not start characters, it's start column, and then 1 is going to represent the second row on our LCD display. And what else do I need to do here? Oh, well, I need to increment the starting column that I'm working with, and I think that's it. All right, so that is going to cycle through every single character we need to print, and this guy is going to print each individual character. Again, these functions might be actually very useful for you in your in your future, personal projects. And I like to do that as well. All right, so what do I need to do now? I need to make a copy of the game board array for updating the board. So for this guy, I'm going to just keep it simple, and I'm going to say copy array. That's a pretty good name for it. So we're going to pass in the game board where we're going to be copying values to, and maximum rows. Since it's an absolute copy of the other one, the other game board, well, then we know that, everything's going to be set up the same. Say maximum rows, maximum columns, and where is it? See, maximum rows, maximum columns. Say it's a perfect copy. All right, so we'll get back to that soon. All right, so, whoops. All right, so how are we going to copy an array? Well, pretty simple. We just go int, and I'm just going to call this A again. Every time I use the game board stuff, I'm going to use A's, and I don't know, just an idea that came to my mind. All right, so let's go the maximum rows, and then let's increment A inside of there, and then we're going to create another one, and let's call this B is equal to 0, and B is less than the maximum columns. So let's increment B, and then inside of here, I just go game board 2, and value of A and value of B is going to be equal to whatever the game board A and B values already are. See, we're just making a copy of the array. Pretty simple stuff. And that's it. That's all you need to do to copy an array. So now it gets down to the really nasty thing here, which is how am I going to simulate the game of life? Well, I think update board sounds like an okay name for a function that updates our game of life board. So update board, and I don't think it needs to be passed anything. That might change. So all I need to do here is just think about these rules right here as I am writing all this code. So I know that I'm going to need to make a copy of our game board. So that means game board 2, and let's just call this is going to be maximum rows, of course, and then it's also going to be maximum columns is equal to, and let's just create this array, and you already know how we're going to copy that. So I'm going to copy it by going copy array and pass in game board, and what that's going to do, of course, is it's going to copy whatever the current game board is, game board 2, whatever the current game board look is to our new array, which is game board number 2. Okay, so I've actually created a game of life before, so I know the basic logic behind it. So what I want to do here is I want to basically convert these rules right here into code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle through our game board array, and I'm going to count up all of the living cells around it, and then depending upon how many are around it, I can then decide if the value is the light is going to turn on or off. So let's just turn this logic that we have right here into if statements. So I'm going to say if, and I'm going to create a function called number of trues, which means the number of, lights that are on around whatever we're checking. So I'm going to say if they are less than 2, well, in that situation, I'm going to say that my game board specific value is going to, let's just do A and B, is going to be equal to false, which means that it is going to be turned off. All right, so I know that's going to cover my first one. And then after that, I can say else if, and work out the second one. So number of trues is equal to 3. Well, in that situation, I will say game board and A and B in this situation is going to be equal to true, because we know that that is going to work out. All right, and then after that, I can say else if, and I can say num of trues, again, is greater than 3. So that's going to cover all other circumstances. Well, then I can say game board and A and B is going to be equal to false, because we know that, because that works out. Okay, so all I did was I converted these 3 lines right here into this stuff right here. All right, so now I need to come down here and just do basically the cycling through of our array. So after I go and make a copy of our array, I think I can get rid of that. So this is going to come down here, but just not yet. I just like doing it up there by the rules because I thought it would be easier to do. All right, so I'm going to say that integer a is equal to 1 and a less than maximum rows, and let's increase the value of a on that. And then we're going to be doing a similar thing. I think my logic is correct here. And we'll do B and B and B. And from that, we will then come in and maximum rows again. And then, oh no, this is going to be maximum columns is what we're going to be working with there. All right, so now what we can do is we're going to assume that the cell is dead. So we're going to say number of trues, because that's what we have up here. And we're going to say that it starts off as a dead cell, and then we'll decide if it comes back alive. Then what I need to do is check the value above as well as below our cell. So I'm going to say for int, and let's call this C, is equal to -1, and then C less than 2, and then increment the value for C. Okay, and then I'm going to check the value to the left as well as to the right as well. So once again, I'm going to say for and int t is equal to -1 and d is less than 2, then I'll do that, and okay, so now we have that all set up. Well, we're not going to check this cell itself, so we're going to say if and not and C is equal to 0 and D equal to 0. So that's going to skip checking the actual cell itself. And then each time there is a true on the top, bottom, right, or left of the cell, we are going to increment the number of trues. So we're going to say if game board 2, and then we can say A plus C as well as B plus D, and close that off, and then we can increment the value number of trues. All right, wow, that is a lot of for loops, and I think I got the logic right. So after we got all those set up, then what I can do is go and use this code up here. So let's go and copy that, and hopefully I got this right. So let's come after we have this. You already know because I show you the working project at the beginning, so boom. All right, so there we go. And I got that there, and I got that there, and I think everything is working. So now let's just go through my logic here to make sure everything works. So I have serial, and I know that. This is going to be 16 and 2 for the size of our LCD panel. Generate random array, generate the game of life array, print to LCD, delay, Okay, I think that's right. So let's go and compile it and see what happens. Okay, there's a problem. So return LED value, and we'll go through and fix all our little errors that we have. So it says LED value was not declared in this scope. Well, that's easy. I just changed this to uppercase V. If that's the only error I have, this is going to be almost amazing. I can't believe it. All right, well, that doesn't mean it works, but we can go and we can pass it over and see if it works. And it looks like I did it. pretty cool. All right, guys. So, wow, that was almost too easy. I expected to have a whole ton of errors. If you watch any of my other tutorials, and when I'm doing this, I normally have other errors. But it looks like everything's working out. And the Game of Life is playing here on the LCD. Of course, you saw it already. And that was fun. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial series. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.